Hi, my name is Ashley.
And my name is Lucia. Welcome back to another episode of the 76 Cents Pod.
And in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about all things study, skills. Yes. So if you didn't know, me and Lucia are both nerds, first and foremost. But we also work with students at our universities. So Lucia is a tutor. My position is called a peer consultant. So I work with students on like study skills and time management. So yeah, we're gonna tell y'all some of our study strategies to help you out with finals week and things like that.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. I guess I can start us off because a lot of students who come to my tutoring sessions, they're often confused on how they're supposed to like review, which I mean, it's a good question because I feel like a lot of the times when you make the transition from high school to college, no one teaches you how to study, which is just sad, but also like it's true. Um, but some things that I've learned both from tutoring and just from my own experience for studying slides and notes and such, the most important thing I would say is you don't need to study everything because I feel like a lot of the times when students come to me, they'll be like, so I'm gonna read the textbook and do all the homework problems again and redo the quiz questions and then rewrite my notes. And I'm like, that is just not going to be effective. Um, and you're not gonna have enough time to do all that. So really, it would be a better idea to think about what your professor wants you to be focusing on. And a lot of times you can figure this out by looking at their slides and notes and such. At my school, at least, all the professors are required to put their class objectives and course objectives on every lecture. So if you had downloaded the slides, for example, you would see them at the beginning. And those are the things that you want to be focusing on because that's what you're supposed to be learning and taking away from that specific lecture or that specific class. So you can use these objectives and sort of just test yourself and like see if you can answer it. Like, for example, if it said one of the objectives was like describe the function of this organelle in a cell, then you would want to see if you can answer that question without having to look through it. And if you don't know how to answer that question, that's when you go back and review the diagrams, the slides, etc. Another thing that is really helpful for reviewing things is just trying to teach yourself or someone else the topic. And this is really helpful because if you don't know how a process works or you haven't fully grasped maybe the deeper parts of it, then you wouldn't be able to verbalize it when you're trying to say it to someone else or just yourself. And this can even be done like in a group setting. So like if you had a study partner, you could try and teach each other concepts, and that way you'll know what parts you don't get because you're not going to remember to bring them up when you teach them. And then at the same time, your partners could help you correct things if they're a little bit off or something like that. So I think that's mainly how I would use slides and notes slash review slides and notes. And I think just prioritizing the things that you need to like focus on that your professor wants you to focus on, and not trying to read everything in the textbook, not trying to rewrite all your notes because that's just not going to be feasible and you're not going to have time for that. So with that, I will allow Ashley to describe the next study strategy.
Yeah, that was really good. Um, so my study strategy, like my main study strategy, especially like since finals are coming up and everything, is just to break down the material. So at the Student Success Center, which is where I work, we have this worksheet that's specifically called Breaking Down Material. And basically, it has a column that says like exam content, and then a column that says study strategy, and then one that says estimated amount of time. Um, so basically what you would do is if your final exam is cumulative, you would break down, okay, like it's on these topics or whatever you think the main topics are, and you can break it down that way. Or if it's not cumulative and you know it's just going to be on chapters like 4, 5, and 6 or something like that, you can break it down. So like chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6. And then for each of those sections, you would then write a study strategy. So the important thing to think about with this is to make sure that your study strategy matches what you're studying. So if you're in like a calculus class or a chemistry class and it's a lot of math-based information, you should be doing practice problems because that's going to be the thing that's going to help you the most compared to like flashcards. That's not going to be as effective for that class. However, if you're like in a medical terminology class and it's a lot of memorization, flashcards might be better for you as a study strategy. So I like to say pick like 2 study strategies just so, you know, you kind of hit the information more than once. And then the last column, you just estimate the amount of time that would take you. So if you think it's going to take you an hour to go through all the flashcards or to read the textbook or whatever you plan on doing for that chapter, you would write that down. So you do that for each section that you broke down in the beginning. And so what I find is I usually see that the time adds up a lot whenever you break it down like this. So it kind of makes you realize like, oh shoot, I need like 8 hours to study all of this material for this exam. I don't want to do that all at one time because that would suck and also not be effective at all because cramming is like the worst way to study. But so what I would do is then take that plan of like the broken down chapters and how long each one is going to take you to study and then put that into a weekly schedule. And so, you know, on Monday, you could be like, okay, I'm going to study chapter 4 for 30 minutes using these study strategies. And you've already had it all planned out. And then you, when it comes to that time on Monday, you just sit down and you're like, okay, I'm just going to do this for 30 minutes, get it done. And then you just spread out your time over the week before the exam. And the day before the exam, you should not be reviewing any new material, just kind of going over things that you've already studied. And then you're good to go. So that's my main thing, just breaking it down and then making it smaller studying chunks is so much more manageable and like way less stressful.
Yes, that was great. So you talked a little bit about practice problems, which I also see a lot of students for, since I'm mostly tutoring in STEM classes. And I think there is obviously a benefit to doing practice problems, but you have to do them in a certain way so that you're not just sort of like memorizing a process, but rather you're learning the process. So for example, if I was studying for, like you said, a calculus test, and I just did a bunch of problems in a row for like the same type of integration technique or something like that, well, I would need to ask myself, like, am I actually understanding why we're using this technique, or am I just copying it because I did it in the last problem? And so a good way to make sure that you understand the separate techniques for different problems is just by mixing the types of problems that you're doing. And this is called interleaving. So like maybe I'll do a couple problems that use like trigonometry, and then I'll do a couple that are just like a different type of integration technique. And that way I'll have to be thinking about what do I need to apply to this problem to get it right versus a different one. And this way you can actually connect it to like the definitions or terms that you might have learned in class, and you probably have a better big picture understanding of what's going on. And another thing that a lot of students do when they practice problems is they go back and redo the homework or redo quizzes. And I think this can be helpful to an extent, but since you're already sort of looking at your past work, sometimes it's not that like useful to you. So instead of maybe doing the same problems, if your homework's from like a textbook, you could look up questions that are like right next to the problems that you already did for homework, because those are probably the same concepts. And then for quizzes, you can think about what was the professor asking here? And if I had changed this one part of the question, how would that change the answer? How would that change the process of me figuring out the answer? And all of this is just to avoid something called illusions of competence, which is when you think you know more than you actually do. And a lot of times it does come up when you're just like grinding out like 100 practice problems in a week or something, because you're thinking, well, I've done all of this work and I've gotten a lot of them right, so I must have a good grasp. But really, it's just like muscle memory at that point. But you need it to become something in your brain that you've stored away, and you can connect it and apply it if you need to. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So my next tip, um, this honestly is something very basic. Um, but it's a problem that I see students struggle with a lot, or at least students who struggle that I end up having to meet with because they're not doing well in their classes. This is like one of the first things I ask is, do you go to class? And half the time they're like, no, or since classes are online now, um, they'll just put the class on but not really pay attention. And, I'm guilty of that as well. But, um, you know, it's really important to attend class because if you don't go, first of all, you have no idea what's going on. They could have important announcements like, oh, your homework is due this day. And then if you don't go, like you're missing out on all those important announcements, first of all. And then you're also missing out on all of the content from the class. So for me, I find it's a lot easier to, just sit in class, even if you're just sitting there listening and you don't take any notes, even if you're just doing that, like at least you'll kind of know what's going on in the class, rather than if you don't go at all and then I don't know, you try to make it back up, look at the slides or look at someone else's notes that's in the class that was there that day that you missed. Like it's so much harder to go through that information and like be like, oh, what was she saying here? Like this doesn't really make sense, rather than like just going and sitting there in the first place. And then at that point, like if you sat through the class but you didn't take any notes, at that point you could still go back to the slides and be like, oh yeah, she was talking about this. And so it's really important just to go to class. Like I know sometimes we want to skip, and like if you have a reason to skip every once in a while, like that's okay. But try to go to class. Um, and then when you're in class, I was saying like it's better to go to class and not even take notes than to not go at all. But really, when you go to class, you should be doing certain things in class that are going to help you out. So there's an acronym that I learned. It's called Slant, and basically it's like how you should be paying attention in class. So it stands for sit up, lean in, ask questions, nod, and track the speaker or take notes. Could be the T, either or. But basically, it's just like a way to keep you engaged in class. And, if you're asking questions, if you're taking notes, if you're following the speaker and sitting up, those are all things that are like going to help you pay attention and really absorb the information that the professor is saying. So that's really important for your learning later on. It's going to make it so much easier to study later on if you do these things while you're in class. And another thing that I like to do is get there a few minutes early and then just review the notes from the last class. So sometimes I'll get to class like even if it's just 5-10 minutes early, and I'll be like, okay, like what were we doing last class? Because I don't really remember. Like I don't review my notes every day, and I know that would be good if I did that, but realistically I don't. And so I'll just look back and be like, oh yeah, last class we were talking about, I don't know, like if I was in biochem, we were talking about DNA replication. And then that way, whenever the professor brings up things that you've talked about previously, you're like, oh yeah, like I remember that from looking at my notes just a second ago. Or like even if you just review your notes a little bit, before the class starts, it puts you like in the right mindset to get ready for class. So those are just some simple things to do while you're in class. I know it's finals now, so a little late to implement that, but for next semester, definitely just start with that and it'll make your life so much easier. But yeah, that was my next tip.
Yeah, I think those are really good, especially for in-person classes. And I know, like, obviously it has been remote for many students, but some classes have been in person. So looking forward to going back to in-person classes. But I actually do have a few like Zoom tips that I've talked about with other tutors. So for example, like even for me, it's really hard to pay attention when I know my classes are going to be recorded. Or like I'm just like, well, I don't need to write this down right now because I can just go back and like literally find the exact point when he talks about it again. And or you'll think, oh, I don't need to like study for this because everything's going to be open note anyways. And I mean, there obviously is truth in that, but it's not going to help you to like not do anything if you're going to take an open note test and you don't have good notes. Well, obviously that's not going to help you. So some of the tips that I've found is that um even if I know it's going to be recorded, like Ashley said, try to listen in at least. You never know if you might have like a question come up and you don't want to like lose a chance to ask it because you weren't there in class. And I mean, a lot of my professors are just using the chat now, so it's not as awkward as like raising your hand and like being singled out in a whole room of people. And most of the time, like someone else probably was thinking the same question. So you're really just helping out your other classmates. And then sometimes, like, if you want to think about the class like a podcast, you can think about the class as being like a story, like it has a narrative, and just make it a little entertaining for yourself. Like, oh, like today we're going to talk about this, we're going to learn this. Give it like a beginning, a middle, a climax, and end. Just it'll just make the experience better and go by quicker probably. And another thing is sometimes when I'm maybe like sitting in my chair and I'm sort of like I have like extra energy because I've been staring at my screen all day for my classes, I'll just do something on the side physically. Like maybe I'll do some stretches on the ground or like play with like a fidget toy or like doodle on a piece of paper, but at least I'm trying to listen in, or at least I'm sitting in my class and not just skipping class for the sake of skipping class. And like I was never really one to skip class anyways, but I feel like especially in college, if I'm going to be paying for it, I might as well go, even if I'm not going to be paying my absolute full attention. I'm losing money if I'm skipping. So that's what I think should be helpful. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any other study tips that I can think of right at the moment. Do you have anything else to add?
I think maybe just some tips in general that I hear a lot about. So group studying can be good, like I said before, if you guys are actually going to be working and asking each other questions and making sure that everyone's on the same page about the topics. Don't cram, even though I mean I'm guilty of that too, but it's not the most effective way to learn something or review something. And another thing is you still have to take care of yourself. So like don't expect to like study for 12 hours and not like eat, drink, sleep, take a break. Like that's not healthy. And you probably do worse on the test because of that. Um, and another thing, if it's like the day before or the day of the test, you don't need to be cramming. You need to save your energy for the test. At that point, really, I don't think trying to learn anything would be effective at all. Like, I'm a person who has never pulled an all-nighter because I just, at a certain point, if I fail the test, I'm gonna fail the test. But like, you're not gonna gain anything by staying up another 5 hours and like regurgitating the same information that you're not observing anyways. So yeah, at that point, just take a nap, go to sleep, eat something, drink some water. When you get to the test, just take a deep breath and tell yourself that it's gonna be okay. Yeah. Do you have any other final tips?
Just, I think you pretty much covered like all the main ones. Like at that point, if you, oh my gosh, if you're staying up like taking an all-nighter the night before a test, I could never. First of all, like I just can't. I physically have never been able to pull an all-nighter because I just fall dead asleep at a certain point, and I'm not trying to do that in the middle of an exam. So yeah, maybe don't do that. You already said that, but don't do that. But yeah, I think we pretty much covered it all. Like stick to your normal morning routine the day of an exam. Don't like get yourself overly anxious or anything like that. And of course, that's easier said than done. But yeah, just do your best and it'll all be great.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, even if you fail, it's fine. Like, you'll be fine. It's not going to matter in like a year. So just let it go. But yeah, I think that is the rest. That is all of the study tips that we had. Did you have anything else to add?
Nope, I don't think so.
Alrighty, well, good luck everyone on your finals. I know for a fact that I should probably start studying, but we'll see about that. Yeah.
Mood. All right. Well, we will see you guys next week, possibly. We're not sure. We got busy schedules, y'all. But we'll see you or hear you, I guess. Well, we won't hear you. You'll hear us in the next episode. So stay tuned. Let us know if you have any requests for any topics that you would like to hear or anything you think would be helpful. Let us know if these tips were helpful for you. Yeah.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Alrighty. Bye.
Bye.